May 8, 1945. The guns go silent. The war in Europe ends. Confetti falls in New York. Church bells ring in London. But in the rubble of Berlin, something else happens. Something quieter. Something dangerous. Two of the most lethal military minds in human history, men who never shared a battlefield, suddenly share a continent. George Smith Patton. 4 stars. Ivory-handled revolvers. An ego the size of an armored division. The man who moved faster than any general in the war. The man who believed, genuinely believed, he was a reincarnated warrior. Caesar. Hannibal. Napoleon. All of them, he said, had lived inside him before. Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov, Marshal of the Soviet Union. Son of a peasant shoemaker. A man who rose from absolute nothing to command millions. A man who signed death orders before breakfast. Who told Stalin the truth when no one else dared. Who saved Moscow, Stalingrad, Leningrad. Who burned through German steel like a blowtorch through paper. Imagine you are standing in a room where both men enter simultaneously. You feel it before you see it. The pressure changes. The air gets heavier. These are not politicians. These are not celebrities. These are instruments of mass violence, instruments that changed the shape of the modern world. They actually met, only once, in Frankfurt. June 1945. The handshake lasted 4 seconds. Witnesses said neither man smiled first. Neither looked away. Both were searching for something, what the other one feared. Neither found it. This is the story of a rivalry that never became a war, a collision that never fully happened. And yet, it shaped everything that came after. To understand the rivalry, you must understand what each man believed about war itself. Patton believed war was romantic, savage and romantic. He wept on the beaches of North Africa, not from grief, from awe. He said he could smell the corpses of ancient Roman soldiers in the Tunisian sand. He meant it literally. He wore his uniform to bed. He read military history the way other men read scripture. His genius was speed, absolute, terrifying speed. The Third Army covered ground so fast that supply lines couldn't keep up. His men ran out of fuel, so Patton stole it. He diverted fuel convoys meant for other generals. He lied to Eisenhower's face and kept moving. His logic was brutal and pure. A moving army doesn't die. A stopped army does. Zhukov believed war was mathematics. Cold, mechanized mathematics. He did not romanticize it. He survived the purges of 1937, when Stalin executed most of the Red Army's senior commanders out of paranoia. Zhukov watched colleagues he admired die not in battle, but in basements, shot by their own government. He learned something from that. He learned that emotion is a liability. That survival requires something harder than courage. It requires calculation without mercy. His genius was mass and coordination. He invented what the Soviets called deep battle, simultaneous strikes across hundreds of miles of front, overwhelming multiple enemy positions at once, giving the Germans no time to reinforce, no time to breathe, no time to think. Where Patton was a knife, Zhukov was an avalanche. Now place them against the same enemy. Nazi Germany. Patton hit from the west. Zhukov hammered from the east. The Germans were crushed between them like a walnut in a vice. Hitler's 1,000-year Reich lasted 12 years. Patton and Zhukov, never coordinating, never communicating, compressed it from both sides simultaneously until it ceased to exist. Imagine you were a German general in 1944. You check your maps. On one side, Patton's tanks are moving faster than your intelligence updates. On the other side, Zhukov's forces are so enormous they blot out the horizon. There is no good option. There is only the direction you choose to be destroyed from. That was the power of these two men operating on the same planet. Now imagine what would have happened if they had been pointed at each other. This is where it gets dark. The guns stopped. But Patton's mind didn't. Within weeks of Germany's surrender, Patton began saying things. Dangerous things. He told journalists that the Nazis weren't much different from Democrats and Republicans. They were just another political party. He said it casually. He didn't understand why people were horrified. In his mind, the war was over, and the next war had already begun. And in that next war, he knew who the enemy was. The Soviets. Patton stood in the ruins of Germany and looked east. He saw the Red Army, enormous, battle-hardened, ideologically driven, spreading across Eastern Europe like a dark tide. He saw what many Western politicians refused to see yet. He wrote in his diary that the United States should keep going east and finish the job. That they should rearm the German prisoners, the same men they'd just defeated, and use them as a vanguard against the Soviets while the American army was still in Europe and still sharp. He meant it. He was not being theatrical. George Patton genuinely believed that failing to confront the Soviet Union in 1945 was the greatest strategic blunder of the 20th century. History has not entirely proven him wrong. Now consider the man on the other side of that calculation. Zhukov in 1945 was at the summit of human power. He accepted Germany's surrender personally. He rode a white horse through Red Square in the Victory Parade while Stalin watched from the podium. He was the most celebrated soldier in the world. And Stalin was afraid of him. That fear was rational. An army loves its general more than its politician. Stalin had seen what happened to leaders who allowed rivals to become beloved. So he acted. He demoted Zhukov, stripped him of command, sent him to run a minor military district far from Moscow. He manufactured charges of looting and insubordination. He did everything short of executing him, because executing Zhukov might have started a mutiny. So here is the moral gray area. Here is the thing no one discusses cleanly. Patton was silenced by his own government for speaking uncomfortable truths. Zhukov was silenced by his own government for being too successful. Two of the greatest military commanders who ever lived, destroyed not by their enemies, but by the systems that created them. What does that tell you about power? What does that tell you about what systems do to exceptional men when those men are no longer useful? Think about that carefully. Because the answer is not comfortable. December 9, 1945. George Patton's car is struck by a military truck on a road near Mannheim, Germany. The collision is low speed, pedestrian almost. No one else in the vehicle is seriously hurt. But Patton's neck snaps. He is paralyzed from the shoulders down. He dies 12 days later. He is 60 years old. The circumstances have been debated ever since. Patton had enemies. He had just announced he was going to return to the United States, retire from the army, and speak publicly about everything he had seen. About the Soviets. About what he believed was a catastrophic failure of Western resolve. He had a platform. He had credibility. He had a mouth that could not be controlled. Was it an accident? Almost certainly. But the timing troubles historians. It troubles them enough that books have been written. Investigations proposed. A former OSS officer named Douglas Bazata claimed, decades later, that he had been hired to assassinate Patton. The claim was never proven. The original truck driver was never properly identified. The accident report was sparse. You can decide what you believe, but you cannot unhear the question. Zhukov's aftermath was slower and stranger. Stalin died in 1953. Khrushchev came to power and rehabilitated Zhukov, bringing him back as defense minister. For a moment it seemed like the Marshal would finally receive what he had earned. Then in 1957 Khrushchev too dismissed him. Accused him of Bonapartism, of building a personal cult within the military, of being essentially too dangerous to keep close. Zhukov spent his final years writing his memoirs. Soviet censors gutted them. Entire chapters about Stalin's catastrophic errors in 1941, errors that got millions of Soviet soldiers killed, were removed. The truth was too damaging for the state to allow. He died in 1974, quietly, in a government hospital. Two men, maximum power, maximum victory, both discarded by the institutions they served. Now here is what is almost never discussed. The meeting in Frankfurt, June 1945. After the handshake, after the photographs, after the formal ceremony, Patton and Zhukov were left alone briefly, with only interpreters present, and they talked. What did they say? The interpreters' notes were classified. Some accounts suggest Patton raised his glass and said something to the effect that they were the two greatest generals alive. Zhukov reportedly did not disagree. Reportedly said the war had been decided by logistics and sacrifice, and that Americans understood the first and Soviets had mastered the second. Two different doctrines of war, two different philosophies of human life, acknowledging each other across a ruined continent. The Cold War began the next morning, almost literally. Here is what history decided. Patton got the movies, the statues, the pop culture immortality. George C. Scott won an Oscar playing him. His face is on merchandise. His quotes are on office motivational posters. Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way. He became the American myth of the warrior, flawed, brilliant, undeniable. Zhukov got the truth. No Hollywood film, no Oscar. But every serious military historian, East and West, ranks him as the greatest operational commander of the Second World War. Not top 5. Number 1. The scale of what he managed boggles the mind. He directed more men, over more territory, against a more capable enemy, with fewer resources per soldier than any commander in history. And yet outside of Russia, most people cannot spell his name. There is something deeply revealing in that gap. Americans consumed Patton's myth because it fit a story they needed: the lone genius, the rebel who gets results, the warrior with too much soul for the system to contain. The Soviets suppressed Zhukov's truth because it threatened a different story: that the communist system, not any individual, had defeated fascism. Both stories were lies. Both stories were necessary. That is what empires do with their greatest men. They use them. They mythologize them. They package them into something the public can consume without being disturbed. The real man, the complicated, violent, brilliant, flawed, fully human creature, gets buried under the version that serves the state. Patton would have hated his myth. He didn't want to be a symbol. He wanted to fight. He wanted one more war. He died reaching for it. Zhukov would have recognized what happened to him. He had watched it happen to others. He survived Stalin's purges by being useful, then survived his demotion by being patient, then survived his second exile by being invisible. He was a man who understood that the system is always bigger than the man. Even when the man is Zhukov. What does that leave us? Two men. Different nations. Different languages. Different everything. Both forged in the same fire. Total war, industrial-scale death, the complete collapse of the world they were born into. Both emerged harder and stranger than the world around them could accommodate. Both ultimately defeated not by the enemy but by the peace. The object of war is not to die for your country, but to make the other bastard die for his. George S. Patton. We must be prepared. We must be ready. We must never again allow the enemy to reach the gates. Georgy Zhukov. One man obsessed with offense. One man obsessed with never being caught unprepared again. Two definitions of the same lesson, that the greatest sin in war is not cruelty. It is unreadiness. History gave them the same enemy, the same victory, the same erasure. What it never gave them was each other. And here is the question that should keep you up at night, the question I want you to answer in the comments below. If Patton and Zhukov had fought each other, not as allies on the same planet, but as enemies on the same battlefield, who walks away? And more importantly, would the winner have been worthy of the victory, or would defeating the other one have simply made him the last monster standing?